Okay, folks. So, good evening. Let's start today's discussion. And today you will see again there are some parts which you have already done. So, we'll try to go through this part very quickly. Okay. And feel free to ask me any question in between if you feel like. Okay, these are the references largely taken from Harris and Harris book and this Berkeley's lecture set, that's available online. And of course, some things I have been taking from Professor Mutlu's lecture slides. Okay, so this is what we have covered so far. We have looked at the instruction set for RISC. We have gone through complete assembly instruction set. Then also we looked at the machine instruction set. We also looked at the concept of stacks, how stacks can be implemented. Then we studied in brief about floating point number. Of course, then we have studied a machine instruction for RISC-V, and then we have just started microarchitecture part. Okay, so this is where we are, and then in this class today we will in brief study about few components and few concepts. So this is where we are. We have covered these three parts. So machine language has to be interpreted underneath hardware, and now we are in the process of understanding how the hardware works, right? Okay. So we are still in data path design. Once we complete data path, then we'll move into control path design. Okay, and we know the data path is where the movement of data happens or where the manipulation of the data happens. Okay, so basically we bring in the instruction and data both from memory. Okay, so memory is part of data path, and then bring it to various registers. So they are all part of data path. Then these instructions gets manipulated in ALU. So ALU is a part of data path. Then in order to move the data from memory to registers, we need buses. So buses are also part of data path. And so we can see that all these are the part of data paths. And of course, we'll have to use multiplexers in between. So multiplexers are also part of data path. And then we have control unit that controls the movement and manipulation of data. Okay, so from memory using data path instruction, we get the instruction into control unit. Basically, control unit interprets the instruction, and then control unit tells further how that instruction is to be executed through various movement of data and manipulation of data. All right. Okay, so today we'll briefly look at these topics. Most of these you would have done in your previous course, so we'll go very fast. And then second part, that once we finish all this, we'll start looking at some more concepts again about sequential logic circuit that will go inside a data path, right? So we'll try to finish all preliminaries before we start study of single cycle data path design from tomorrow. Okay. The first, of course, is multiplexers. So a lot of places we use multiplexers, right? For example, here, you know, this place where there are two signals are coming and the output is one. So one of the two are to be selected. Similarly, here you can see we need multiplexers. Here as well, we need multiplexers, right? So, all right. So multiplexers are used very heavily in data path design. Okay. All right. You would have done the multiplexer design earlier. Basically, multiplexer selects one of the inputs based on the control. So S is a control signal. Okay, and then it selects one of the two. So there are two buses here or two inputs of n bits. Okay, this is A and B of n bits, and depending on if S is 0, If s is equal to 0, then this input goes to, these n bits will go to output bus or output lines, and if s is equal to 1, then this will go to, b will go to output, right? So this is a concept of multiplexer. So s input selects one of the 2 raised power s inputs, right? Okay, so here s is 1, there are only 2 inputs, so we need just one control bit or selector bit. All right, okay, simple. You can easily design this, right? There's no brainer in it. I mean, it's a very simple way you can create a truth table which has basically 3 inputs, a, b, and s. Okay, and for various values of a, b, and s, it will be, since there are 3 inputs, so the 2 raised power 3, which is 8 rows will be there. And if s is equal to 0, then something that is representing a will go to output, right? So these 4 bits will simply go to output. If s is 1, something that is here will, oh, I'm sorry, the first one was here and this is the second one, will go here. All right, and you can create, from the truth table, you can create this kind of equations, and can from this you can design a multiplexer, right? So this is this diagram shows 4:1 multiplexer. Now there are 4 inputs, out of which 1 is to be selected, so we need 2 bits. Clear? Simple. Okay, so and we can draw a truth table which will have how many inputs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can have a truth table with a, b, c, d, s0, s1, and so there are 6 inputs, so you will have 2 raised power 6, which is 64 rows. Simple. Fine. So we have completed multiplexer, which is a very important part, and then we have adders. We use very often adder. For example, you can see there is one adder here, there is second adder at this place. Now this, what we show here is a template or just very high level view of data path for S5, and something that we see at the corner is nothing but a bus. Okay, now you'll see, we'll elaborate on this, but there are a lot of places where you use adders, right? So adder is second component. I'm sure you would have done adder in your course. So what we use is actually full adder, not really half adder. Okay, and you know about it, right? It has 3 inputs, carry in, and 2 bits to be added. Okay, and then it has sum and then carry out. So it's very simple, right? And based on this truth table and these equations, this exclusive OR which is missing, okay, you can create a circuit for full adder. Okay, what we have shown here is single bit adder. Basically, there are 2 bits are to be added, right? And we can have n bit adder, right? So we are showing n bit adder, this n bit adder. So where n bits are coming in A input, n bits are coming in B input, and then output is also n bit, and there is a C in and C out. Okay, and there are various kind of adders you would have studied. Simplest is of course ripple carry adder, which is slowest one, and then these 2 adders are generally used in the design of ALU, which is carry look forward and prefix. So these are faster ones. These are faster, it means it may require more hardware, so that could be a cost issue. Okay, all right. And okay, so what we have completed now is muxes, adder, and then we next is subtract. Okay, so subtraction, as you know, we can do it by addition. Okay,
Sir, I got a question. Sir. You said that other two might use more hardware. Sir, if we add more hardware, doesn't it mean that we will use more time? Because less hardware, matlab, the simpler the machine, it will be more fast.
Not necessary, not necessary. I mean, if always you can reduce overall, execution time by adding things in parallel. See, your delay, maximum delay depends on your, how many combination logic you are using in sequence. All right. Okay, that is the propagation time, right? I mean, for example, you have one combination logic element, second, third, fourth, and second one is using, say for example, two in parallel, and which are executing exactly on same time, wherein this is sequential, right? So totally it depends on what is the worst case sequential combination logic delay. If your design is not correct, okay, I mean, you may want to reuse this as part of ripple carry adder, but overall time required could be more. So you can create more parallel structure or your design, for example, carry look adder or prefix adder. If you can, if these are giving you opportunity of designing where operations can be done in parallel, it means that doing the operations parallel will require more hardware. Okay, and may take so it may be more expensive but reduce the time. So this optimization we'll see continuously. Very often we less hardware means things are faster, and very often, but not always. Okay, when we are doing things in parallel, then obviously you need more hardware, and when things can be done in parallel, then there is a more cost. For example, what we discuss now is single uh, ALU, and there can be multiple ALUs where things can happen in parallel. Okay, just giving you example. All right. Okay, subtractor is nothing but adder with 2's complement, and then of course we add C in, because in 2's complement number you invert the second number and then add 1 to that, right? So A will go as it is, second one will be 1's complement, this is and then add to 1, the least significant bit becomes 2's complement. So this is very simple implementation of a subtractor. All right, so we have completed three things. We have done muxes, adder, and subtractor, and then these are very important part of ALU. Okay, ALU will surely have adder, subtractor, and comparator. Okay, and then in data path we have muxes. All right, so next is comparator. So ALU also has comparator, wherein we compare two binary numbers whether they are equal or one is greater or less than, right? So generally two types of comparator we use: equality comparator or magnitude comparator. All right, so this is the equality comparator that's shown here. Okay, if they are equal, then output is 1, otherwise 0, right? And the next is comparator. Okay, so comparator is when we compare two binary numbers, right? So we have two types of comparator, either equity comparator or magnitude comparator. Okay, equity means then when A is equal to B, then output of the comparator will be 1, otherwise 0. Okay, and second kind of comparator is where we have operations like if A is less than B, then output is 1, else output is 0. Okay, so we can create a comparator as is shown here. Okay, so when A is equal to B, okay, then output is going to be 1. Okay, so very simple. All right, so next is ALU, arithmetic logic unit. Come back, right? So comparator is to compare two numbers, right? So you would have done some instructions like less than equal to, or greater than equal, branch LE. Okay, when we have to branch LE means what? Less than equal to, right? or BLT, sorry, branch in less than. Okay, so what are we doing there? We are comparing two numbers, right? Okay, register one register value is compared with other register value. So these numbers will be compared. Okay, then we need a comparator somewhere. Okay, so the and this is going to be magnitude comparator. Okay, when we say branch on equal to, when two numbers are equal to, then branch. Okay, then if we are comparing two numbers and both are same, then output will be 1. So these, so in ALU these signals must also be produced. Okay, and for that we need comparators. So all right, so till now we have briefly studied adder, subtractor, and comparator, and of course multiplexers. So these are important part of data path. Okay, and ALU, as you know, can do arithmetic logic operations. Okay, uh, and let's now this number of operations that ALU can perform could be many, depending on the instruction set. For example, if instruction set allows multiplication of two numbers, okay, then ALU should be able to perform that. Division can also be performed. If floating point numbers are to be multiplied, then it has to support floating point operations as well. So right now what we are doing is very simple instruction, operations that ALU can perform, which is addition, subtraction, and or. Okay, so ALU is right here. Okay, and all right, so basically in order to perform these four operations, okay, we need 2 bits for control. Okay, so these are the 2 bits here. Okay, when bit is 0 0, then it will perform add operation. If bit is 0 1, then ALU will perform subtract. If 1 0, then and 1 1, then or. Okay, so all right, so if 0 0 is there, these two n bit numbers will be added and output will be available here. So this shows how we can implement this very simple ALU. Okay, and what we have here is this part is for summation. So if both bits are 0 0, okay, then this is 0. It means that now we are, A is of course coming directly to this header, then B will come here, and this mux will select this, and this header will perform the summation. So what we'll have here is A plus B, okay, is available here. Okay, and then so it's available here and here as well. Okay, so if when we select, when we have 0 0, then it will select this input, so output will be A plus B. Simple, you would have done this. Okay, when the control signals are 0 1, okay, 0 1, so 1 is here. So what we take is A is coming directly, and then we get here 2's complement. So we get inverted 1 plus we add 1 to this. So this is carry in, which is against 1 bit, and output is available here. And of course the controls, the 2 bits are 0 and 1, so we select this one. So output is A minus B. Similarly, we have if next is AND operation, we take directly these two values. Okay, and then this AND operation is performed here, and control signal is 1 0, then output will be available here. Any question?
Yes, sir. Actually, sir, in the mux, why are there two separate ports for addition and subtraction? Like, even if one bit is changed, then like it can become subtraction. But after the adder part, why do they like separate out into two different like wires?
Here you're
Uh,
talking, yeah, just a minute.
yeah. Yes,
Here,
sir.
right? Here, right?
Yes, sir.
So basically, yeah, I mean, see, here there are two bits, right? Zero, zero. So when zero, zero is, yeah, actually it's same, but you have to select one of the two. Uh, yeah, see, you can, otherwise you can say then when is 00 or 01, then you can select the output. So it's basically it's a simple design, and because it's a 4:1 comparator, mux it's using, so it's just what is doing is just duplication of that. You're right, it's
Sir,
you
if we
can do
keep
it otherwise.
sir, if we keep the same ALU control, then we can't control the plus or minus because for addition and subtraction we are using the
So no,
LSB of
so
ALU
basically,
controller.
yeah, so you have to have two bits here, 00 and 01 to represent addition or subtraction. Okay, now its question is that here why we are making it 2, right? So basically, I mean, if you change the design of this and say that if it's 00 and 01, then select this to output, right? You can also do that, but that will complicate the design. So it but signals should remain 00 and 01, right? Only then operation can be performed. Okay, so it's just question of convenience of a designer, nothing more than that. Okay, you can design it with differently also. All right, so this is very simple design, so I will skip that. And the status flags will also, ALU also has status flags, like if the result is negative or result is 0, or there's a carry out and overflow, and these flags comes out here. These are called ALU flags. Based on the flags, you can, control unit can take some actions. Okay, and different ALUs have different kinds of flags. Okay, what we have discussed here is something that some design has used. All right, all right, any question?
Sir, in the previous part, where exactly is C in?
Here it's coming now. You get the, see
Is
what is,
that ALU control or C in?
so it's not, is here it's treated as scene. It's not ALU control. ALU control is here. So basically you're getting same bit, right? See, when least significant bit is 1, only then you are doing subtraction, right? And you are taking this least significant bit here. Okay, this is bit 0, right? This shows bit 0. When bit 0 is 1, then this input is treated as, because this same bit is going to both mux and adder here, then same bit, this bit we can treat as Cin. All right.
So ALU control is of 2 bits and only 1 bit, the least
Yes.
yeah. Yes, sir.
Least
Thank you.
significant bit is going at to these places, right?
Okay, sir.
All right. Okay. All right. So if it is 0 for in case of addition, then it, whatever we see in, it doesn't matter, right? Only in order to make a 2's complement number, we need we can use C in S1. Okay, only when it is 1, then it will be 2's complement, it will create. All right. Okay. All right. So okay, a few more concepts. All right, so we have studied combinational logic circuits so far, right, in last 20 minutes. Sequential logic circuits you have already studied in brief. Basically, something that can store the state of machine. Note, computer has only finite number of states. Okay, and it's basically a finite state machine, and each state has to be uniquely defined. All right. And what we use to store state is nothing but memory and registers. All right. So now let's start looking at few concepts, and then we'll move on to single cycle design. So we need sequential logic, right? And how do we implement sequential logic? Let's look at an accumulator example. Accumulator is one which accumulate numbers or do some kind of operation like this. It has bits coming in from input, which is xi. So there will be first x0, then x1, then x2, and so on. Okay, and then this will perform addition in each, so x0 should, what it will do is nothing but x0 plus x1 plus x2 and so on. And then initially s or sum is 0. Okay, so basically s0, which is 0, plus x0 plus s1 x2 and so on. Okay, so now what we want to implement is s equal to 0 in the beginning. This is 0, and for x1 x2 x3 over time s is equal to s plus xi. Okay, I mean we can always have started from x0, what we have considered here, or you can start with x1 x2 x3. All right. All right, and each x value is applied in succession, one per cycle. So each cycle we are doing this addition of bits, right? Okay. All right. So now, can we have design like this? This is x coming in. This is s. Okay. So this loop will give us s plus x. Also, each cycle one bit will come. So initially x0, then x1, then x2, and x3, and so on. What is the problem here? This does not work, right?
Numbers will be recounted.
Yes, because there's some delay here, some CL delay, and then as soon as output is available, it's this available here, it will go again as an input, right? So there is, how do we even, first problem is that how do you even set s equal to 0 in this one? If let's assume that in the beginning there is something available there, right? So even initial condition is not satisfying. Okay, and then this, based on your combination logic delay or adder delay, this thing will go on for single value of x0. Okay, because x0 x1 are coming each cycle, but multiple times this operation will perform. It means that s may be some junk, so sx for example, plus it will do x0 plus, addition of that will be say s1 plus s2 plus whatever. So all this will be unpredictable, right? So it means that we need something that will control the flow of information, and that is the use of register. Okay, it controls the flow of information in meaningful way. Okay, so register is a state element that is used here to hold up the transfer of data to the adder. It controls the flow of information, right? So now it will work. Now initial value of s has to be 0, so you can use the reset button. So output of s0 is equal to 0 will come, and this output is available here, and this is x1, so 0 plus x will be available here, and then at next clock cycle, it will get into register. Here we are assuming the clock leading edge triggered register. Okay, now it will work, right? Is it clear? Any question?
No, sir.
All right. Okay. So use of state element is to place, it's a place to store values for some amount of time. Okay. And it helps in control flow of information between combination logic blocks. Otherwise, combination logic will keep doing things and there is no way to control them, right? Because now different combination logic blocks may have different kind of delays, and because of these delays, output can be not very well predictable. Okay, so it is very important to control the flow of information between combination logic blocks, and hence we need to put a register or sequential logic element in between. All right. Okay, so it will allow orderly passage of information. All right, so let's look at some example. Okay, let's look at the waveform or the clock. Okay, so this is a clock. You understand it, right? So this is a clock, and this is a time period or clock period. Okay, and t is equal to 1 by frequency. Simple. Signals are transmitted over wire continuously. All right, and transmission is effectively instantaneous. So we assume in the design that there is no propagation delay or time for signal to travel between two ends of the wire. We assume right now 0. Okay, once very detailed design somebody is doing, they may have to consider propagation time as well. Okay, but right now if a bit has been placed in wire, is instantaneously available at all points in the wire. So that's the assumption we'll take. All right, so we have already discussed this rising edge triggered flip-flop we consider. So this is an adder circuit. It has n bits. Okay, and these bits can be zeros and ones. Okay, like shown here. Now we need a representation for that. So what we do is that let's assume that these bits are, for example, there are 4 bits here: x0, x1, x2, x3, and they can vary. Like x0 is in first clock cycle is 1, and second clock cycle 0, third is 0, and so on, right? Similarly, x1 is also changing, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, and so on. So we can do this so it means that first clock cycle here, the value of these 4 bits here is 1, 0, whatever here, 1, 0, 1, 0. Okay, all right. Okay, so basically this is MSB, so 0, 1, 0, 1. So this represents 5. So we can represent it in this way. Okay, it means that at this point in time, 4 wires will carry the signals 0, 1, 0, 1. All right. Here it will be this represents 0, 1, 1, 0, and so on. So this is the representation that we use. So this is nothing but a group of wires when we interpret this as a bit field, and then it essentially represents a bus. Okay, in bus, remember that all these signals are transmitted parallelly. All right. Okay, so this is earlier diagram that we have seen. Now we can represent it in this way. Okay, this is S value. Okay, and okay, and this is the X value. X is this the one coming here, right? So initially it is x0. Okay, then summation of x0. So value of, just a minute. Okay, so S is this one. So this is the one here, and this summation of is basically a previous value of S and x0, right? So here it is x0. So this goes here, then second cycle x0 plus x1 will come here. Third cycle we have x0 plus x1 and x2, where x input is of course here, and then it will value of S will be this one. So this is the way we represent the output. Any question on this? I'm sure you would have done this. Very simple, right? I mean, this is the just think that this is just a representation. Okay. Now let's look at some other aspects, right? There is, okay, all right. So there is always some delay between input, when inputs are available, and the output, right? And this is combination logic delay or adder delay. So that this delay comes here, right? Because leading clock edge is here. Okay, so operation is happening here, but output will be available after some delay, right? So these two values, inputs are available at this instant, and output will come only will be available. That's value of S will be available only after some time, which is combination logic delay. All right. Okay, so we'll come back to this diagram a little later as well. Before that, let's look at registers. We have already studied register, which is nothing but combination of flip-flops, but there are certain notations that we are going to use here that we want to describe. This is data input, okay, D. This is data output, which is Q, and then we have write enable, okay, and then there's a clock, and there is one is reset button. Okay, so we have reset, clock, write enable, data input, and data output. These are the kind of places where data can come in, data can go out, and how control can happen, right? Okay, so these are minimum things that are required in register. Okay, all right. So just a minute. Okay, so data input, for example, in register, we can write something, right? That will be data input. Okay, data output is that we are going to read something from register. Okay, and then clock input, of course, there is a need for clock, and so on. Okay, this is very simple design of a register using multiple flip-flops, right? If it's a 32-bit registers we consider in this 5, so there will be 32 flip-flops inside that. All right. Okay, so this is what we have studied now, and based on this, we'll look at the second part, which is using these components, how we can further develop data path. All right, any question? Okay. Hi folks. So let's start second part. Okay, so we are still here. So let's look at the following things. Let's look at flip-flop timing behavior. We look at program counter, what can be maximum frequency. We'll look at design of register file. We have looked at register file in brief, but we'll go into a little more detail. And let's look at storage elements for RISC machine, which is nothing but memory and register file. And then look at single cycle, multi-cycle, and pipeline machines in very brief. From the next class, that's tomorrow, we'll start with single cycle data path design. So still we are here, we are discussing data path. Once we complete data path, we'll go into control unit. And note that data path consists of following things: register, memory, ALU, multiplexer, and buses. These are the components where data moves or data gets manipulated. And in order to do that operation, which is data movement or operation to be performed on data, that's control that we have seen in case of ALU, all these bits that we have seen, two control bits that we studied, 0 and 1, for 4 operation that we studied, all that comes from control unit. So control unit receives instruction from memory through data path, and then it control unit, after decoding etc., tells data path how to execute the instruction. Okay, so in order to do that, it produces control signals for muxes, ALU registers and memories that we have seen. Okay, so right now we are focusing on data path, and once we complete data path, we'll get into control, how that data path operations are to be controlled. Okay, so let's look at the timing behavior. Again, you would have done this earlier, but it becomes important when we're designing processor. Then we need to focus a lot on timing, because within a clock cycle we need to finish certain operations. Okay, this thing we have already seen, that we are using edge triggered flip-flop. Okay, so it means that at rising edge of the clock, input D is sampled. So this is the input to the flip-flop. Okay, this is the input D here. Only at the rising edge it is sampled. Okay, and after some time, that is, which is combination logic, sorry, the delay from here to this place, when that value becomes available, that sampled value becomes available output after some time, right? So this arrow here shows the delay, that because of when the output value, at output the value D becomes available. All right, is it clear? Shall I repeat? All right, so it means that D is to be input, D is only to be, which is coming at input, is to be considered only at the rising edge, and all other times it is ignored. Clear? Okay, so some of you would have done photography, or at least I'm sure all of you would have been photographed by a photographer. You know what is, if somebody is taking your photo, what does the person say? Ready, 1 2 3, or hello, or smile, or whatever. Okay, it means that it's giving you signal to be stationary for a certain period of time, right? If you have a movement during the time, then it may cause, because the shutter is to be pressed when there is a no movement. Okay, so we call this a setup time. And if you've done SLR photography, I'm sure you would be familiar with some of these terminologies, right? So basically it takes it, you're going to click somebody, if you're going to take portrait for example, then person is stationary. Okay, and the person has to be stationary for some time, and we call this a setup time. During the setup time, don't move. If you are getting photographed, you don't move, right? So usually we take say 30 seconds or something as a stationary setup time. Okay, and then the whole time when shutter opens, then object shouldn't move, otherwise photo will be blurred. Okay, so need to hold until the shutter opens, until camera shutter closes. So between opening and closing of shutter, object has to be stationary. Okay, and third is time when whatever has been taken in, from the time you have pressed the shutter or when shutter opens till, and after some time the output will photo will be available in viewfinder. Okay, when you press the shutter, from that point it takes certain time when the photo is available in the viewfinder, right? So basically there are 3 times. Setup time is before shutter opens, and then the whole time, when this period shutter is open. Okay, and after there is some time in which from the starting of the shutter opening when the output is available, which is this scene that is shown here, right? So there are 3 times. Similarly, we can exactly a similar analogy we can have in the flip flop. We the D signal has to be stationary or has to be stable before the clock edge happens, right? Okay, and before the clock edge, the D has to be stable for some time, and once clock edge happens, after that also there has to be hold time. Okay, and then from clock edge, leading clock edge, after some time the output is available. The value of D is available at the output. We call this clock to Q delay. Okay, so basically 3 times: setup time, hold time, and clock to Q delay. So it's represented here. So this is the clock. Okay, this is the value of D, and this is the output here. The third one is output. So what we have, first thing is that D has to be stable for certain period of time before this clock edge. Okay, so we have this setup time. So signal is stable during this period. Okay, and then signal has to remain stable after the leading clock edge, and we call it hold time. So this is the hold time when signal is stable during this point. Okay, and then from this point, output will be available after some time. That we call it clock to Q delay. Clock, that's leading edge of the clock, to out when the output is available. Clock to Q delay. So now here at this point, output is available. So there's a third delay. Okay, now if you look at this diagram, accumulator diagram, then you can see that there is always some delay. Okay, when the output is available. Okay, all right. So for example, you can see, here what is the output here? Output is Si minus 1. Okay, so there is always at this leading edge. Okay, Si is the, okay, so so basically there has to be delay. There has to be some time here which is setup time, some hold time, and then there is some delay, and that is reflected in the diagram, right? So this is leading edge of the clock. This Si is here. Okay, this is Si. This value of is taken in, and then this value is available at output only after some time. So there is some delay in between. Okay, all right. You can actually go in detail, look at little more, look at the timing diagram, etc. And of course, what happens is that for some, we cannot synchronize when this input is available and when the value of Xi is available. So what happens is that for some period there is a uncertainty. The Si value may not be correct for certain period of time. Okay, but the value of Si will become stable after some time and will capture only at the leading edge of clock. As a result of that, the correct values get registered into the register. Okay, so that uncertain period or undefined period is shown somewhere like this, here or here. Okay, so come back here. So these are the things that we have discussed so far: setup time, hold time, and clock to Q delay. We'll show it here as part of this diagram. So this is the clock. Okay, now, okay, this is, so here we have setup time, it means that this value of D has to be stable during this time, so setup time, and this has to be stable for whole time. So there's a minimum requirement, and then output is available here, the Q, this Q, after some time. Okay, so these three periods are hold time, so setup time, hold time, and clock to Q. Okay, all right. So now let's come to this model before we discuss it further. So in general, data path consists of combination logic and registers. Okay, so flow of information is to be controlled between combination logic block using registers. Is it clear? Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So we have combination logic block, registers, and of course we can have some feedback. Okay, so combination logic blocks are separated by registers. Okay, and clock signals are used only in sequential logic elements, obviously, right? Because combination logic circuits don't need clock, and feedback is optional, right? Okay, so now let's see how fast we can run our clock if we have this kind of design. And this is actually the way we structure our data path. Okay, so let's look at only something that is between two registers. Okay, all right. So of course we have not shown registers here. Two registers, just one registers, and one combination logic block. So we have combination logic block here. Okay, it could be adder or whatever, and then output is available here, and that gets registered into the register. Okay, and of course this state of this can be used to give input to combination logic, which is optional. Okay, so let's look at the delay. Okay, so we have combination logic delay, TCL, which we call it TCL. Okay, and then we need what? This output is available, and we have to hold it. There has to be, sorry, setup time. Okay, before leading edge of the clock. Okay, and there has to be hold time, and then we say that from the leading edge clock output is available after certain time. So timing diagram is as follows here. So here we have a clock. Okay, and this is the input. The input is here. Okay, for example this one, and then we have output is available here, and this output CL, and then this is the output, the one here. So what we can see is okay, look at any point in time, and so what you will get is between any two leading edges. So for example, let's take these two. So okay, it means that here the output is available from combination logic block, and then we have to this will be available here after click to Q delay. Okay, and let's assume that we are using feedback loop. Okay, and then there will be delay corresponding to this one. Okay, and then this output is to be used here, and then we have to have setup time, right? Or we can start from here, and we'll say that we need TCL time, then setup time, and after clock to Q, output is available here. Okay, so this is the total delay that we have, which is click to Q, CL plus setup time. Okay, now this time has to be sufficiently long enough such that it can be done within a clock cycle. Okay, and this summation of this has to be less than clock cycle time. Okay, and so this now defines the limit on how fast you can run the clock. Okay, look at this other way, right? Same thing we are showing it here. So maximum delay is click to queue delay plus click to queue delay is here. You know, when the clock happens and how much time it takes to come to output. Okay, so it's shown here. And then of course combination logic delay, this delay, assuming that this takes 0 time for transmission, and then of course is hold setup time, which is here, setup time before the signal has to be stable, and summation of these three is the maximum. So look at various combination blocks in the data path, and you have to see that what is going to take maximum time, and that defines the clock speed. Okay, right? So maximum frequency is the minimum period, which is nothing but equivalent to maximum delay. So whatever is the maximum delay, okay, that will define the clock speed. All right, so let's okay. Wow, my all right. So let's look at very simple example of program counter. It's very simple, right? So the clock is here, then the current value of PC, and there's a next value of PC, right? So what is current value? This is the current value of the PC. The PC value at some instant is this one, and then this will see in order to get the next instruction, we need to add PC plus PC should become PC plus 4, right? And then 4 is coming from here, and this is the addition function. Okay, so this is the next value of PC, and will get into PC only at the leading edge of the clock, right? So we have, this is the current value of PC, this is the value, let's assume some value. Okay, so this is the current value. Okay, now it will, now you note that at this leading edge, this PC value, okay, I'm sorry, so PC value is available and PC plus 4 value is also available here, because the, so this is value of PC, this is PC plus 4. Okay, so now what will happen? Okay, now you can see that there is, from this point onwards, okay, the PC value will change, right? So the current value of PC will change and there is some delay. So PC value will become PC plus 4 and there is a delay here. Okay, all right. So now what we look at the diagram further, then you can see that the delays here are, so the value of this value has to be stable for T setup time. It means that this value has to be stable, which is PC plus 4. So this is earlier PC, not the current PC, but earlier PC value plus 4 has to be stable for T setup time. Okay, then there is a, from the leading edge of the clock, it means that this one, output is available after clock to Q delay. Okay, and then there is then there has to be this delay due to this combination logic block, which is TAD. So if you sum this up, we'll come up that minimum time delay that is there, okay, which is corresponding cycle time, has to be T setup plus T adder, which is TCL actually, and T clock to Q. So from this you can derive the clock rate. Okay, so take up one example. Setup time is 15 picosecond, T add is 75 picosecond, and then click to Q is 10 picosecond. So total, so T minimum has to be, that cycle time, this T minimum has to be greater than 100 picosecond. And it means the clock speed in that case has to be less than 10 gigahertz. Okay, so is this clear? Is this example clear?
Sir, can you explain one more? Actually, sir, PC+4 part is actually next
No.
PC. Yeah.
Okay, you just think in terms of that PC is to be added by 4. So this is the previous value you consider, right? See, because you will always get confused between PC and PC+4. Okay, so PC+4 at any point in time is previous value of PC plus 4. Okay, in notation, given this notation, it's confusing. Okay, so basically what are we doing? I mean, if you look at it, remember only this thing that there is some delay for combination logic block. Okay, because we are using, register alone cannot do the activity, right? You need to come out, for addition, subtraction, or some operation that you need to perform require combination logic block. So there is a delay for that. And then there is a delay for sequential logic, that is a register. There has to be setup time and then clock to Q delay. So combination of these three should be combination of these three gives the maximum time that's required, and that should be done within a clock cycle, because your next the result should be available such that a next clock edge the output can be, that whatever result is available will be written into the register, subsequent register, or same register after feedback. Okay, remember this thing, right? I mean, the rest is all, what is value of PC here and PC+4. For example, PC+4 is available and this is PC. So actually you can treat this as PC previous, and this is nothing but PC previous plus 4. You look at it this way, then it will become clear. Okay, all right. So now this way we can find out what is the maximum speed at which we can run the clock. Now note that the something that's dominating is this number here, right? Combination logic delay. And we will have to, if the data path has this combination of sequential circuit and registers and so on, then we'll have to look at it, what is causing the maximum delay between two registers, right? So there's a register 1, register 2. Okay, and then this path is causing the maximum delay, which is critical path. Okay, so this path, I'm sorry. Okay, is a critical path, right? Now it means now the critical path puts a limit on what is the maximum clock speed that you can have. Okay, so if the clock period must be longer than the critical path, okay, it means that within the clock period, which is nothing but this, okay, all this, all this should be it should be possible to complete this, which is all these delays. So we'll clean it up and see that all the delays that in this critical path are click to Q delay. This is because of this. Okay, when the clock happens, right? Clock happens, let's assume here. So output is available here. Then combination logic delay 1, this delay, combination logic delay 2, this delay, then delay 3, okay, then adder delay, okay, and then signal has to be available before the setup time for this register to register it, right? So it means that output has to be available, setup time at least should be stable for setup time. So add this. So all these three defines now the maximum time that is required between two registers, and that has to be greater than clock period. Okay, all right. Okay, so idea is that in order, something that's important is critical path. If critical path is long and there are other shorter paths available, it doesn't matter, right? Because the critical path has to be considered, because this is the worst case delay that can happen between uh, between two registers. All right. Okay, so now the question is that now we have this thing that we have, this is the design. So let's assume that only two, and then there is a combination logic delay, and then there is of course some what is critical path. Now the question is that how can we now improve the speed, because if this is long enough, then how can we include the speed? Then clock has to be really large one, right? So one way to do that is that split this whole combination logic into multiple combination logic blocks and have then in between registers. Now this delay is now limited, smaller, so you can use faster clock speed. And this is what we call as pipelining. This concept we use in pipeline. So output, one register input you take, do some computation, then output is available to register, then and so on and so forth, right? But this operation can be done in shorter clock speed. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So now let's get into register file details for RISC-V. Okay, now onwards what we'll discuss is essentially RISC-V. Of course, there will be some generalization somewhere or other. So in RISC-V, we have 32 registers. Okay, and then note that we can read two registers at a time. Okay, so all operation like add, S1, S2, S3. These are to the operand, source operands, where it means that we are reading register S2 and S3 and putting into register S1. So have you noticed that at any point in time, in most of the many operations, we can read maximum two registers. Okay. So these are the two, it means that we have to have two outputs corresponding to two registers. So read data 1 and read data 2. Okay, and then note that we can write only one register at a time. So this is write data. Okay, and then we need to know which register we are reading, these two registers. So that number has to come. Okay, actually, so whether reading first register, second register, third register, that is to be defined in register number. So these two are for that. And then similarly, we need to define which register we are writing. So those bits will come here. Okay, so these three gives register number that we are reading or writing to. And then these two gives basically register output port, or we buses are connected to that, or we get the data out from two registers here, and this is for writing to the data. So register file has two read ports and one write port. All right, it's very simple design of this is that you can have outputs available from all registers, and then register number 1 you give it to mux, and which is n is to 1 mux when n is a number of registers. So basically 32, if you have 32 registers, this will be 32 to 1 mux. Okay, and okay, and then we can get the data output based on which register we are reading. So we have 32 register, it means that we need 5 bits. So the 5 bits will come here. Similarly, 5 bits will come to second register to select the output from the second register, right? So this is This is the implementation of two read ports for register file with n register. So n in our case is 32 here. All right. So okay. Okay, this is for the writing. Okay, so we have which register we are writing. So there will be decoder here. Okay, and then data will come here. Data will actually available to all registers, but only based on the output here, decoder output, one of the register get enabled, right? So this data will go, for example, if it is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, so it will go into this register 0. All right. Any question?
Sir, the registers, right? Like, are we getting all 30? Sir, if we consider particular register, are we getting all 32 bits at one time? Like,
Yes, yes, yes. Always remember that we never get sequential. So basically, that's the reason the bus size is 32. Bus is the number of 32 parallel wires. Okay, a bus, although may be shown here as here as one wire, is actually its width is 32. It means that actually is 32 parallel wires that are coming, which we call as a bus. Whenever you get this kind of thing, right, means that it's a 32 bit, 32 parallel wires coming in.
sir, so we would need a mux for each bit, right?
Just a minute, just a minute. So what are we doing here? Just a minute. Okay, all right. So sorry. Just let me just clarify. I just didn't notice it. So so this is actually write enable. I'm sorry, I thought this is data port. This is write enable, which will enable input into this one, and this is register data. Okay, now here this has to be 32. Okay, so this has to be 32, right? So this bus is of 32, so it's okay going here, and then it will only if the output is using this register number, if the output is 1 here, only then this will be enabled. So this will actually in register we have write enable. So this write signal and then it will finally, this write signal is coming here, is becomes write enable, and only the write enable is enabled for register 0, for others it's not enabled. So this is your question is right. So this has to be 32. Of course this write signal, it's a single bit. Earlier I have written it 32, which was wrong. So it's is it clear now?
Yes.
Okay, so data in register, remember all 32 bits get checked in or written simultaneously. All 32 bits are read simultaneously also in the output port. If 32 bit is not written somewhere, then please assume it to be 32 bits. Okay, so then FSM, you would have studied this earlier, so I'm just skipping it. It's available. I mean, it's all slides are available. Please go through it. Not going to spend time. Essentially, what we do, you would have noticed it till now, is that we have in data path combination of combinational circuit logic and registers or sequential circuit logic, right? This is all in the design, and we have to do it very intelligently such that all operations are done properly. Okay, so please, if you have not studied FSM in your course, please go through slide set. So very briefly, let's touch upon a few points and then we'll stop. Okay, so now here we will consider ideal memory. Okay. Okay, so what is property of ideal memory? Okay, so there is a data in and data output port. So there is a data in port and data output port. Okay. Now remember that we are not discussing, here is a memory, regular memory. Okay. Okay, RAM, let's assume. Okay, it's a RAM, not really any other memory. Okay, so there is a data in and data out. So note that in memory we can read only word at a time or 1 byte at a time, right? We cannot read 2 bytes, 2 words at a time. Okay, there has to be only one port, unlike register file where we can read 2 registers at a time, right? Here, because memory is huge and it's our byte addressable memory, so what we can read is essentially 1 word at a time, or some instruction can also read 1 byte at a time or half word at a time, right? But output is available only max is 1 byte, one word. Okay, so we need just one data output port, which is of 32 bits. Okay, let's assume that this is the design right now, right? So this is input bus available here, and this is output bus, which is of 32 bits. Okay. Okay, and memory word is found by address. So this is the address. Okay, address of the location from which we are going to read 32 bits. Okay, and then write enable has to be enabled or 1 if you want to write something. Okay, so writing will be done only when write enable signal is enabled, and then the clock is going up, edge is going up, leading edge of the clock. Okay, only then writing is done. Reading can be done at any point in time. All right. So clock input is a factor only during write operation. So only for writing we can when clock is required. Reading can be done at any point in time. So from after this we can do reading at any point in time. Okay. So during the read operation it behaves as a combinational logic block. Okay, so if address is valid, then data output is valid after access time. Okay, there is some delay, some access time, and after that output is available. So what we are considering is ideal memory right now. Okay, and of course we have studied already registers. Remember that even in register we need write enable. So we have following inputs: data input, data output, okay, and write enable and clock. This is what we are talking essentially about. One a very simple one, simple register, right? One register. So if we have multiple registers, so we will show it in this way. We have now bus, write bus, which is 32-bit wide. Okay, then 2 read ports and 2 buses, both are 32-bit wide, and we have 32 registers, each of 32 bits, and then we have RA and RB, which gives address of register A, address of register B, address of first register, second register, address of register on which something we can write, and then there's a clock, and then write enable. Okay, so fine. So all these things are clear. All right. So these points we have already discussed several times. Okay. And then these details are available to us. We have X0 to X31 registers. Okay. And then we have other state element, which is program counter, which is nothing but 32-bit register. And then we have ideal memory. Okay. So memory contains both instruction and data. It's a byte addressable memory. And we understand the concept of byte addressable memory. And we now here, because the idealized memory, we assume that there are two memories. One is instruction memory and other is data memory. We'll see why we need two memories. Okay. Okay, so basically in one cycle, we cannot do reading and writing. Basically we can't do two writes together. Okay, only one write can happen. Okay, and so we'll actually come to the logic why we need two memories, which is separate instruction memory and data memory. It will become much clear when we'll study pipeline memory, pipeline architectures. Okay, so instructions are read from instruction memory, and okay, all right, and data is written into data memory. Data is read or written into data memory. All right. All right. Okay, any question?
Sir, earlier when we were working with that code heap and stack, they were all in one memory but from different ends, right?
Yeah, I mean so now we are, see, in fact, if you see, we are getting in more detailed architecture now. Okay, we didn't discuss timing and all those things, right? So we can visualize this as single memory also, data memory and instruction memory. But when we come to pipeline design, it becomes very clear that why we need two. Basically, because within one cycle, we need to do certain operations. Okay, and different instructions are in pipeline, so they may be doing certain, while one instruction is writing into memory, other instruction is reading instruction from memory. Okay, so in the pipeline stage, right? That's the reason this, even the cache memories are of two, right? Instruction cache and data cache, such that they can be accessed separately in parallel. Okay, so we are getting into more detailed design. Earlier we have taken assumed memory to be one, which is fine. Okay, so and we are doing it because now we want to improve the design and have parallel access. All right, so let's,
how do we access all the address in a memory? So, because memory is very big, we can't use mux for all the address.
no, so come again.
So, how do we use memory? Because we have a lot of address. Because we have a lot of address.
So you need to look at the design of RAM. Okay, I'm not sure whether you studied this in your digital logic course. If you're not,
No,
basically this is how RAM is designed. So we'll look at that when we'll come to memory, right? Although I thought it's covered, but let's get into detail and we'll look at least we'll spend 10 minutes into design of RAM. Okay, so right now how memory is structured, we'll discuss it later. Okay, right now we need to just assume this, that there are separate instruction memory and data memory. All right. Okay, so last part that we need to discuss in the next 5 minutes is single cycle versus multi-cycle design. Okay, in single cycle, okay, entire instruction is executed. One instruction is executed in single cycle. Okay, so cycle time has to be big enough to accommodate the most complex instruction, which is going to take maximum time. For example, in RISC-V, which instruction takes maximum time? Load instruction. Okay, so cycle time is limited by the slowest instruction, and cycle time is fixed, right? So this is a cycle time in single cycle memory. Okay, this is second cycle, this is third cycle. Now if we, and in the orange, the instruction is executed, and still some time is left out, because this time corresponds to the maximum worst case execution time of any instruction, because all instructions are going to take same cycle time and cycle time is fixed. Okay, all right. So now this is, so now second instruction takes just very small part of that. Okay, so all right, however this will require separate instruction and data memories. Okay, so wherein in case of multi-cycle design, what we do is that we create small cycles. So clock means clock speed can be faster. Okay, and instruction will take multiple cycles to execute. So this is one instruction taking, instead of the time, this much time is available for an instruction, we can finish the instruction in this time, and then second instruction can start, which will take just one small cycle, and then we can execute the third instruction, which is executed here, and so on. Right now this is see, so from top level it looks like this is a neat design. Okay, but that is not so, because the way you design whole data path and different units having, is very difficult to execute in this way, that one instruction is going to take 5 cycle, another is taking just 1 cycle, and third instruction will start after completion of second instruction. Right, this is not the way it is. It's not a very clean design. Okay, so as a result of that, this design is not in use. Okay, but it helps use of some functional unit, like reuse of functional units like adder, etc., can be reused. So we are not going to look into multi-cycle design. We look only at single cycle design, and then we will get into pipeline design. Okay, so pipeline design is derived from single cycle design. Okay, it means that each instruction is going to take, okay, I will repeat, the time available for each instruction is the same. Like in single cycle design, this time is available for each instruction, whether you use it or not. Same concept you use in pipeline design. However, we split this into number of cycles, like here. Okay, so this is available for first instruction, this is available for second instruction, and so on. Okay, so this applies pipelining to single cycle machine. It executes several instructions simultaneously, that we have seen. We have looked at the example, right, of a queue, food counter queue. Okay, exactly same thing happens in pipeline. It must add logic to handle dependency between simultaneously executing instruction, because see, second instruction is doing something or using a functional unit which previous instruction is also using. Okay, so there can be some dependency because functional units are the same. Then we need to handle that. Okay, so now what happens is that, so instead of having this kind of combination logic which takes long delay, we are splitting this into now this kind of design that we have seen earlier, right? Okay, so these are the registers now. Okay, so this requires non-architectural pipeline register. Note that word non-architectural. Architectural registers are nothing but these 32 registers that we use. Okay, 32 registers that we use, like in case of RISC we have whatever x0 to x31. Okay, these are called architecture registers. Now this non-architecture register is only to keep intermittent results, or we treat this nothing but buffers. Okay, so pipeline processor must access instructions data in the same cycle, and hence we need separate instruction data memories. Okay, so all almost all processors that are available commercially are basically uses pipeline machines. Clear? All right. So that's all for today. So we have looked at logic circuits, and we see what can be maximum clock frequency, and we have seen that is nothing but maximum delay is because of setup time, click to queue delay, and combination circuit delay, in which combinational circuit delay dominates. And we'll have to look at the worst case delay, and then that defines the overall clock speed. So clock speed should be big enough to accommodate summation of these three. Okay, and of course we in processors we use synchronous digital logic circuits, and that uses clock signals. Okay, so storage elements required for RISC-V machines are register file and memory, and we have seen both design of register file and memory. What we consider is ideal memory. Okay, in ideal memory, there are certain things that we have noticed. First is that writing is only at the leading edge, while reading can be done at any other time within the clock cycle. Okay, other thing that we have also noticed is that in single cycle design, we are going to use separate instruction memory and data memory. All right, that's all. So next class we will study single cycle design. That's tomorrow morning. Okay.
Sir,
yeah.
I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Sir, there were a diagram where we use 3 CL for the maximum delay.
Yeah.
Sir, what will be the click to queue time for that system?
No, see, don't get confused between two delays, right? Click to queue is basically in registers that are in between. These are non-architectural registers to buffer the values, and we have seen the use of these buffer or registers to give some kind of control to flow of information. Okay, when you are registering that values that are available from combination logic circuit into a register, and then that value, because in any register output is available at any point in time, and what click to queue says or clock to queue says that it's available after a certain period of time, because register is what? It's nothing but D type of flip-flop and combination of that, and takes time for signal to propagate. So there is some delay, and that delay we show is as a clock to queue delay. Well, and this register or buffer, the output of that goes to combination logic block, and then after combination logic block it goes to other register. So the combination logic delay plus setup time plus click to queue is a maximum time between two registers, and that defines a clock period. Okay, so where is the confusion coming here?
No, sir. I took that the queue is the output and click is the clock end. So
Pardon?
I was thinking that queue is the output at the other end. So,
no. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.